Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to a special program of Diplomatic Enclave. I'm your host, Khalid, but I'll quote a Kashmiri poet, Muhammad Nadeem, and this is a translation into English. He says, "These cold black eyes that were like suns, with rays of happy dreams that leaped from each lash, are now bottomless black wells." You must have understood what I'm talking about. We are talking about Kashmir. Kashmir, a flashpoint between two nuclear powers, Pakistan and India. Kashmir, an area that desired independence, that desired freedom, that desired that its people get the rights, the fundamental rights that they so deserve. But since the last decade, since 1947, they have been deprived of those rights. Pakistan, on various fora, has been trying since the last decades to give them those rights, to let them live in peace, to let them decide for themselves what they want to do with their lives. But unfortunately, India, through its various tactics, whether it be by force or through diplomacy, has been hell-bent on not making them do so, on not letting them get the basic human rights that they so deserve. This show is dedicated to the people of Kashmir. To talk more about Kashmir, to talk about this flashpoint, this beautiful area that people called heaven on earth, I've been joined by the 27th President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Excellency Sardar Masood Khan. Masood Khan, thank you very much to have given us the time and to have also joined us for a very important topic that is not only close to our hearts but also close to yours.
Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm so glad that you're devoting this program, your program, Diplomatic Enclave, to the cause of Kashmir. I'm really grateful to you. And the Kashmiris in the Indian-occupied Kashmir, in Azad Kashmir, the people of Pakistan, and the diaspora community all around the world, they'll be beholden to you for focusing on Kashmir in your program.
So inshallah, I just hope whatever we say also translates into some form of action. Our government is also doing all it can on different levels. Your government is doing, you yourself on a personal level are doing so much to bring forth this important issue at different fora, whether it be the United Nations or whether it be in front of different other communities, international communities. Like I was reading, sir, that you have talked to various British delegations off and on, and you have told them that if you want to give any kind of aid to India or if you want to collaborate with India, you should also press upon them, impress upon them that it should be somehow linked with the Kashmir cause, with giving the basic fundamental rights to the Kashmiris.
Absolutely. This is a very big challenge for us. When we go to Brussels or to London or to any European capital, their standard response is that this probably is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan and that we should sort it out through dialogue. We always tell them that we are ready for dialogue, we are ready to engage India, but India has shut all doors on dialogue and diplomacy. So we can't talk to ourselves, we can't have a monologue in Kashmir, we need to have dialogue, and it takes two to tango. The other point that we make, and you have rightly highlighted it, that the European countries are the custodians of human rights. Over the centuries they have developed human rights standards, conventions, treaties, and they take pride in that. In fact, I'm in the process for the development of human rights law was accelerated after the Second World War in the aftermath of the devastations of that war and with the emergence of the United Nations. I mean, you had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Commission on Human Rights was created and so on. So you have the laws and the forums for the promotion and protection of human rights, and we tell them that you have your laws. For instance, the European Parliament or the European Union has laws that if India is violating human rights standards with impunity in Jammu and Kashmir, they must be held accountable. And for instance, if European Union is negotiating a trade deal with India, then it must invoke those human rights laws, which is required by their own law, their own European Union laws, or by the international laws.
Sir, speaking of human rights, speaking of laws, India celebrates its Republic Day on the 26th of January every year. The people in Indian occupied Kashmir celebrate that as a Black Day. The day is celebrated, of course, when the Constitution of India came into place in 1950. But what use is a constitution, sir, when it does not give the basic human rights to people of a region, when it does not give them the right to decide what they want to do with themselves?
You know, on the Indian Republican Day, I tweeted, and I want to repeat the content of that tweet. I said that you celebrating your Republic Day because this is the day you constituted your republic because you won independence. But you're denying that independence, that freedom to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and that's why they call it a Black Day. You, from being an independent state, you have turned into a colonial state, and you are worse than your masters, the British rulers, because there was some rule of law during the British period. But there is no semblance of rule of law in the Indian occupied Kashmir. It is naked aggression of the Indian occupation forces against the unarmed and hapless and helpless Kashmiris. So that's why they mark it as the Black Day. And India should, in fact, I mean, one sure way of putting an end to this crime is that India should quit Kashmir, and they should, in fact, vacate their aggression in that territory.
But sir, you speak of India vacating Kashmir, but it is going on the very other end. It creates organizations such as the RSS that even do not give those basic rights to Muslims in other parts of India. Leave aside that in Kashmir, they have been behind all the brutal massacres that have happened in the past, and despite that, none of the international organizations declare the RSS as a terrorist organization. Why so?
You know, under the leadership of Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the Muslims of South Asia decided to create a separate homeland. Why? Because our contention at that time was that Muslims would not be safe in a majority Hindu India. And this is precisely what is happening. As you have rightly pointed out, that they are targeting not only Kashmiri Muslims, but also Muslims throughout India. And this is their version of a secular India. You know, secularism was a facade which was used by the Congress party, and later it is being probably used by the BJP, which is in fact a communal party, which is not a secular party. But this is only a facade. Behind that facade you have Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh's extremists, violent extremists, who kill in the name of religion, and they want to squeeze space for all minorities, include particularly Muslims. And now their favorite target are Muslims in the Indian occupied Kashmir, in Jammu and Ladakh, and in the valley of Kashmir. And they are threatening them with pogroms and genocide and ethnic cleansing. This is happening, this is regrettable. But one thing that I want to highlight, in fact, and you prompted me to focus on this aspect, despite all the coercion that they have used for the past 7 decades, they have not succeeded in winning hearts and minds of Kashmiris. I mean, there was coercion, of course. There was this economic incentives that they gave to them. They invested in economic development. They also enlisted the support of their local allies. They created 2 political parties, local parties, the National Conference and the PDP, and the Congress was there, and so was the BJP. It is still there. But despite all these heavy investments, they have not succeeded in annexing or assimilating the territory of the Indian occupied Kashmir with the Indian Union. So what is the writing on the wall? The writing on the wall is that the Indian occupied Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, does not belong to India under any circumstances, under any national or international law. And that's why they have failed miserably. What do you hear when you get this footage from Kashmir? What are the slogans that you hear? They say, "Hum kya chahte hain? Azadi. Hum lekar rahenge azadi." And they say, "Go India, go back." This is what they're saying. So India's strategy obviously has not worked for the past 7 decades.
But despite, sir, you talked about coercion, sir. India is also now trying to get together with like-minded people, like-minded forces. Let's put in point Donald Trump and the United States to put Pakistan on one corner when it comes to its standing in the Committee of Nations and when it comes to its stance on Kashmir as well. Pakistan is only helping Kashmiris politically, morally, diplomatically, but we are pushed aside as if we are in some kind of war against India, including Kashmir, when we, on one hand, are only helping them in these three manners. Despite that, we have also Donald Trump that puts Pakistan on one side. Under all these circumstances, what are the forces, Masood Khan Saab, in your point of view, which will always back Pakistan when it comes to its stance on Kashmir?
You see, we are who we are, and we can't be defined by India, or we can't be defined by the United States or their president, President Trump. I think that the people of Pakistan are honorable people. They believe in honor and dignity and human rights. They also want peace and stability in South Asia. They want a peaceful solution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. We do not opt for the use of violence or force. In fact, I mean, if you look at the empirical evidence, India for the past 7 decades has been using coercion and in fact state terrorism to quell the freedom movement in Kashmir, and it hasn't succeeded. So India needs to be branded as a state terrorist and it should be sanctioned. You rightly pointed out that India, through its clever manipulation and by misleading the Western countries, they are preparing this kind of ground against Pakistan. And I think but Pakistan would survive. Pakistan has survived in the past. Pakistan will survive this bad patch also. And it would be triumphant once again, because what Pakistan and the Kashmiris are saying is that the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, the Kashmir dispute, should be resolved in accordance with the United Nations Security Council resolutions, which call for a plebiscite to ask the people of Jammu and Kashmir what they want. What is their determination? What is their decision about the political future of that territory? And what is the political future of the people of that territory? This is about diplomacy. This is about engagement. This is about reaching out and looking for a democratic solution. This is not terrorism. This is not violence. India is a practitioner, a propagator and a practitioner of violence in Kashmir.
Sir, I totally agree with you on that. We also have separatist movements happening in Kashmir. We have the APHC. I'll quote one of the statements that was said recently by the APHC that says, "India claims to be the world's largest democracy but virtually stands exposed in Jammu and Kashmir as it is trampling all basic and fundamental rights of people since the last 7 decades." Why isn't the world seeing this trampling of human rights since the last 7 decades? Why isn't the world reacting to it?
First, let me clarify one point, one fine point. It's not such a fine point. This distinction has to be made. The Kashmir movement is not a separatist movement. It is a movement for the realization of the right to self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. There was a separatist movement in Khalistan. There was one in Tamil Nadu. There were centrifugal tendencies in Assam and other places. But Kashmir is different. It is about self-determination. It is not about secession, because you separate when you have legally become part of a state. So, but your question is, why is the international community not responding? International community is very broad and vast. It includes civil society, it includes human rights NGOs, global civil society, global citizens all around the world. It also includes the United Nations, major powers like the United States, European Union, permanent members of the Security Council. While some attention is being given to the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, now increasingly the international media is covering the carnage that takes place in Kashmir every day. So this is quite reassuring. You do not have an information blackout on Kashmir as it was until a couple of years ago. But at the same time, you're absolutely right that the United Nations is completely passive. It is their responsibility, it's the responsibility of the United Nations Security Council to implement its own resolutions, or of the United Nations Secretary General to proactively offer his good offices. He does so evasively and defensively.
But sir, even when the United Nations wants to do something like in the UNMOGIP, India never allows the organization to set base in India or to go and visit Indian occupied Kashmir.
Yes, this is height of arrogance and obstructionism. This is a UN mandated, UN Security Council mandated mission of military observers in India and Pakistan. And it reports regularly to the United Nations Secretary General and to the United Nations Secretariat despite all the handicaps. So I would like to say, yes, it demonstrates India's negative attitude and anti-United Nations attitude, in fact. But even the United Nations is not holding India accountable for its lack of cooperation in the implementation of this peacekeeping mission. So earlier I was talking that the UN Security Council has a responsibility to implement its resolutions. And your question, earlier question as a matter of fact, that we have raised this issue, the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, quite successfully in the Human Rights Council. In fact, a couple of years ago, the High Commissioner for Human Rights had also proposed dispatch of a fact-finding mission to the territory. India refused to receive this mission. In the international community, you would also include the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 57 countries. And they're quite vocal in condemnation of massive human rights violations in Jammu and Kashmir and crimes against humanity which are being committed by the Indian occupation forces. I would also like to add here that they have appointed a special envoy on Kashmir, and their Human Rights Commission regularly monitors this horrendous human rights situation in the occupied territory.
Time for a short break. We'll return with the 27th President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Masood Khan, with more on the Kashmir uprising. Stay tuned. And we're back after the break in conversation with the 27th President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Masood Khan. Masood Khan Saab, nearly 100,000 men, women, children have been martyred in the region. 700,000 troops are deployed in Indian-occupied Kashmir. What is India afraid of? Of losing the region out if it does not let the people give them their basic human right that they so deserve? Is it so egotistical in its approach?
Well, it has nothing to do with India's ego. At one level, it is chauvinism, and at another, it is their apprehension. Apprehension that if they give this right to Kashmiris, the right to self-determination to the Kashmiris, their entire state, the state of India, may become fragile and may in fact start unraveling. I don't think that you can run a state on such weak basis. You have to have some other doctrine for creating and sustaining a state. The other thing that I want to point out is that you've cited the figure of 100,000 people who have been killed by the Indian soldiers. I think the actual number is much bigger. I'll take you back to 1947-48 when through an organized massacre, I would call it genocide, they killed about 247,000 Kashmiris in Jammu alone and forced about 500,000 Kashmiris to flee their own homeland, and they were pushed to Pakistan or Azad Kashmir. Since 1947, they have been killing Kashmiris every day, every week, every month, every year, every decade. And their number should not be less than 200,000 at least. There are mass graves, there are unmarked mass graves, and every day there are these forced disappearances, these are staged encounters, there are arbitrary incarcerations and torture, and as a result of all this cruelty, hundreds of thousands of people are losing their lives over the decades. I think that India must have a new concept of statehood, which is not based on human rights violations and repression of the Kashmiris, because the present policy of coercion doesn't make India stronger, it makes India weaker. And in the long run, probably they will make the state of India, the Indian Union, weaker by treating the people of Jammu and Kashmir so unjustly.
So you talked about the Indian doctrine. Now, where does all those pellet gun injuries that the innocent Kashmiri youth have sustained at the hands of the Indian army come in when it comes to the Indian doctrine?
You talked about this doctrine. It has 4 points. One is that inflict punitive measures against the Kashmiris, give them unbearable punishment. This is Delhi's doctrine. Second is that do not talk to Kashmiris on the political aspects of political dispensation of the Kashmir dispute. And the third is do not talk to Pakistan on Kashmir through bilateral talks or through in any other forum. And the fourth is, and this is an announced doctrine of India, try to isolate Pakistanis diplomatically and project the Kashmiri movement as terrorism. They haven't succeeded in doing this. You particularly mentioned the use of pellet guns. I think the pellet guns is the cruelest manifestation of India's coercion in the Indian occupied Kashmir. It is unprecedented in the annals of warfare. I mean, this technique for terrorizing a population was not even used during the Second World War or in the ethnic cleansing that took place in Balkans in the 1990s. So India has taken barbarities to a higher plane altogether. Now, as you must know, that they have deprived hundreds of young men and women of their eyesight permanently. There are 1,200 other victims who lost their eyesight partially. They have lost either one eye or they are on the verge of losing the eyesight of the other eye. And there are also related injuries. Now, this, the intention was that the Kashmiris would be cowed down and they would somehow submit to the Indian writ. The reaction has been quite opposite. The slogans in all the towns and cities and villages of Kashmir are, what do we want? Freedom. And again, that we will get freedom. This is the kind of voice that resonates throughout the Indian occupied territory.
Sir, so many days remind us of the oppression that goes on in Indian occupied Kashmir, whether it be this day, the 5th of February, whether it be the day of independence, whether it be the day that activists like Burhan Afghani were martyred mercilessly by the Indian forces, or the 19th of July, accession to Pakistan Day. So many days remind us of what the people of Kashmir, of Indian occupied Kashmir, want for themselves. Now, once and for all, in your point of view, sir, as president, what are the measures that now additionally should be taken on different fora to reinforce this right of the Kashmiri people?
the Indian occupied Kashmir is one of the most heavily, most densely garrisoned place on earth. And there's little that we can do militarily, and we are not advocating a military solution to the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. That's why we are investing all our time and energy and resources in the political and diplomatic campaign for the realization of the right to self-determination. So this is the sphere that is available to us. We have another challenge. India from time to time, in fact every now and then, fires across the LOC and kills our innocent civilians and our armed forces personnel who are defending our borders and boundaries. So, and the third challenge that we are facing is that India has unleashed a declared, I would say almost a declared proxy war against Pakistan in Balochistan, in Fatah, in Karachi, in other cities of Pakistan, in retaliation for Pakistan's policy on Kashmir. Now, therefore, I think that given these challenges, what we ought to do is to accelerate our diplomatic outreach, because India has been quite successful diplomatically all around the world in selling its narrative. It's a false narrative, but they have, through different means, through diplomatic means, through their communication tools, have convinced the rest of the world that the war in Kashmir is an unjust war, and that it is not a peaceful struggle of the people of the territory for the realization of their right to self-determination, or that it is some sort of terrorism. I can say with full authority that right now there is no terrorism by the Kashmiris in the Indian occupied Kashmir. All the terrorism that is there in that land emanates from Delhi, and it is manifested by the actions of the Indian occupation forces.
Sir, you talked about violations, cross-border violations have almost every year been going on from the Indian side, and they always blame Pakistan for having started that. When that is not the case, then they do false flag operations in their country and blame it on Pakistan. Then they say that their soldiers have entered Pakistani territory when it is never the case. Do the international community, do the major powers really digest all of this information, this false information given by India? And if so, if it is happening, why is it happening when it is all based on falsehood?
I don't think that the world is giving any credence to India's claims. These violations, you talked about violations, in 2018 alone, I mean only 1 month has passed, and yet the violations have been, according to the figures that I have, are about 270, and some 20 people have lost their lives already, and many more are injured. Last year, 2017, I think there were 2,359 ceasefire violations, and some 80 persons were killed. Life near the LOC for the people of Azad Kashmir civilians is hell, because their houses are targeted, the men, women and children are killed, and then even their livestock are not spared, they are also massacred. So, and our brave, valiant armed forces, they lose their lives. The world is not giving credence to what the Indians are doing. I mean, the world knows that they are trying to divert attention from their atrocities in the Indian occupied Kashmir. What I'm worried about is that in Washington, D.C. or in New York, people think that this is business as usual, that this is that exchange of fire between two hostile nations, India and Pakistan. And in the process, I mean, the issue of Jammu and Kashmir disappears from their radar screens.
So you talk of different tactics. I'd like to add to that the hue and cry made by the Kashmiri pundits that they are being marginalized in Indian occupied Kashmir, when in fact it's the other way around. It's the Kashmiri Muslims that through their martyrdom, through their senseless killing, are being marginalized in Kashmir. And secondly, in 2015, there was that ban on beef. Then came the pellet guns and other things. Do you feel, sir, over the decades, this whole campaign by the Indian state to psychologically, to physically weaken the people of Indian Jammu and Kashmir, has that had any effect on them? Has that weakened their spirit?
You have raised 2 points. The first is about pundits, and I think that pundits were, through a systematic plan, expelled from the Valley of Kashmir. If you ask pundits, if you meet them in different parts of the world, they would say that they would very much want to go back to the valley and live with the Muslims, their Muslim neighbors. In fact, some Muslim neighbors are still the custodians of their properties. And pundits are very much part of the fabric of Kashmir, the social and political fabric of Kashmir. They do not want to live in separate settlements, illegal settlements. Now, the other aspect that you have highlighted is about this coercion and anti-Muslim measures which are being taken and which are being enforced by RSS extremists. Has this weakened the Kashmiris? It has really affected their morale. It has made life hell for them. And this entire population of Kashmir is traumatized because they are living in this volatile, violent atmosphere. Every day they see their near and dear ones, their young men and women killed, particularly young men who are being targeted. Women are molested. So they are a traumatized society. But at the same time, let me tell you that this hasn't affected their aspiration for freedom. In fact, this has strengthened their resolve to get freedom and to continue to work ceaselessly for their freedom from the Indian yoke.
So when it comes to efforts on Pakistan's diplomatic front to apprise the world body about all these senseless killings by the Indian state, by the Indian army, in occupied Kashmir, to quell their quest for freedom and independence from India and to gain accession to Pakistan. You, as a diplomat, sir, in the past have in your various postings also time and again talked about this, highlighted this, whether it be at The Hague, whether it be in Beijing, whether it be in New York, or whether it be at the United Nations. You have also, if I've read it properly, time and again talked about this issue with the different representatives of world powers. What has been their reaction when you discussed the topic with them?
In the realm of diplomacy, we have done quite a bit. We need to do a lot more because our efforts must reach their logical conclusion, which is the liberation and freedom and liberty of Kashmiris. And we hope that this would happen sooner than later. You asked about my own diplomatic experience. Yes, we have raised this issue in Geneva, in New York, in Washington, D.C., other world capitals, and also in international conferences and organizations. I think that the world is responsive if you put across your point of view with conviction, with consistency, and in a resolute manner. The world would respond to your démarches and to your statements and pronouncements. Therefore, as I said earlier, that diplomacy is the way forward. And this is our tool as well as our vehicle for fighting the war of freedom in Kashmir. And I think that if we aggregate all our resources, harness them and use them astutely, intelligently, and effectively, there is no reason why we would not be able to get the right to self-determination of the Kashmiri people.
Finally, sir, you were born yourself in Poonch. Your family migrated in 1947. You have, over your whole personal and professional life, dedicated a certain part of it for highlighting the cause of the Kashmiri people, whether it be at the diplomatic front, whether it be as the president of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. What would be your message to the people of Pakistan the people of Azad Jammu and Kashmir and the people of Indian occupied Kashmir.
Don't lose heart, have courage. We are pursuing the right path, and one day we will triumph. Don't be intimidated by India's power or its clout or its influence all around the world. These things are transient. What is permanent is your will, your political will to win freedom. And we, the Kashmiris, are demanding the right to self-determination as a right. We are not begging to give this right. We are not begging somebody to give this right to us as an act of charity or philanthropy. And therefore, if we forge unity amongst our ranks, if we go back to the international community, if we leverage our strengths in the fields of communication, there is no reason that we would not succeed. So I would say that we should keep the flag of freedom high, and one day we would triumph.
The message could not have been stronger. One day, the people of Kashmir will triumph. One day, inshallah, the hopes and the aspirations of the people of Indian occupied Kashmir will see fruition when Indian occupied Kashmir will have a plebiscite and the people of that region will decide for themselves what they want to do with their lives. Till then, what we can do as Pakistanis is raise the issue of Kashmir on a political level, on a diplomatic level, and on a moral level. We are humans after all, and Kashmiris are our brethren. Omer, Khalid bids you farewell from this episode of Diplomatic Enclave. We'll be back inshallah next week with another program. Till then, take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz. And I'll end the show with this collective dream that all people of Pakistan and Kashmir as well as Indian occupied Kashmir have, that Pakistan and Indian occupied Kashmir will become one. Kashmir banega Pakistan. Allah Hafiz, and thank you, sir, very much for your time.
Thank you.